What do Moses and a submissive wife have in common? This one is for marriages that are hanging by a thread. Probably not for the happy marriages. This is for the ones that are in trouble. And as I always say when I bring up the word submission, but you all know I love to teach this. I know the truth of it, and I know what God's done in my life through His Word. But we have to understand things come way down the road. we learn things here, we start to walk in them, but really the promise of what God says is not usually immediate. Sometimes it's years and years down the road. Has been in my life, but man, it's so worth it. I went to bed the other night and it was my birthday, and I got in bed and I was just thinking, God, thank you for my life. It was such a wreck. And through time, through God's Word, through just trying to live in it the best I know how, you give God a little bit, He gives you so much in return. And He works on your character through the whole thing. But as I always do when I'm going to talk about husbands and wives, if you're in an abusive situation, verbally, physically, whatever, God does not call you to stay in a situation like that. I just want to preface it with that. This is not to you. You need help and compassion. You don't need somebody to beat you over the head with you ought to do better. So just want to put that out there. I love the book of Exodus. It's like binge watching a Netflix series. We go from one episode to the next with each chapter. You got the birth of Moses, his mother putting him in a basket in the Nile. Can you imagine? And we have to remember, these things really happened. A mother had to put a little, probably 3-month-old in a basket in the Nile. I think there's crocodiles and hippopotamuses and everything in there. Hopefully, I hope I didn't just make that up. But she had to put him in the Nile. Pharaoh's daughter sending her people to fish him out and taking him to raise him. Then he grows up, he commits a murder. Then he's out in the desert, a burning bush with God in it. No big deal. Several meetings with Pharaoh, the most powerful leader in the world, that do not go well in the beginning. Plagues on a nation, like water turning to blood, flies, gnats, killing of the firstborn. So we got all this. This is really happening. It outdoes Hollywood. And then a victory march out of the country with all the treasures of Egypt in hand. It ends with the building of a tabernacle. God tells Moses how to build a tabernacle because God wants to meet with them. And then, miracle of miracles, God's glory comes down and fills the tabernacle right in front of everybody. And God leads them daily in the desert through a cloud. Can you imagine seeing God's presence every day of your life? You walk outside and there's God's presence in a cloud. Exodus 40:38, it says, "The cloud of the Lord hovered over the tabernacle during the day, and at night fire glowed inside the cloud so the whole family of Israel could see it." This continued throughout all their journeys. Every day, physical presence of God in a cloud. When I first started trying to be a decent wife, because I was not, I was the worst of the worst of the worst. I learned about authority and submission through Moses and his interactions with Pharaoh. I know that seems like an unlikely and unromantic place to start, but it was so powerful to me that I feel compelled to share. I believe it's the reason I'm more in love with my husband today, 35 years into our marriage, than most people are on their honeymoon. I talked to quite a few people, and happy marriages are about as rare and elusive as a Bigfoot sighting. Most people tolerate each other. They do not enjoy each other. In a Christian home, marriage is supposed to show us, our children, and the world the mystery of Christ and the church. We're to be so thrilled with each other and one with each other that we are fun to be around, and people will be drawn to our Jesus through us. I mean, God calls us one. The Trinity is one. Can you imagine the Trinity arguing and fighting for power all the time? It would be ridiculous. Deep inside, we all long for a happy home. Why else would Hallmark movies and Nicholas Sparks books be so popular? Even movies with car crashes and mobsters have lots of love stories intertwined. We all want someone to make us feel loved and complete. God created us that way. He said it's not good that man be alone. We were made for romance and love and all this stuff. However, many homes are a battleground of who makes more money, who cleans the most, and who's going to pick up the dirty underwear and socks. It's very sexy. This is where Moses comes in. When I started to read the Bible, I saw something amazing when God called Moses to go to Pharaoh. He told Moses, who had been in the desert tending sheep for 40 years, who had committed a murder while he was in Egypt and had to run, he told him to go to the most powerful man on the planet and give him a message from God. Pharaoh didn't respect or believe in Moses' God. As a matter of fact, Pharaoh was using all of God's people, the Hebrews, as his slaves. Did they look like they had a God in heaven that cared about them? They did not look like they did. He was the one in power, and God's people were his little minions whose only purpose was to serve and worship him. And he was able to beat them and have them killed at will. I mean, the reason Moses was in the Nile was because Pharaoh said every baby boy that the Hebrews had to be thrown into the Nile or had to be killed. So, I mean, think of the power he had. It was incredible. He was a dictator, and the Hebrews had no power, and God goes to Moses and says, I want you to go give him a message from me. And Moses was like, I don't want to go. And there's tons of details in this story that could take weeks to talk about, but the details are not the point. What God started to show me through this amazing story is that he tells us what he wants us to do, and that's the end of mine and your responsibility. When he puts us in a position of subjection, which is being under another person's control, he becomes responsible for what the other person does. Our only responsibility in this life is to love God with all of our hearts and listen to his voice above all others. When we get under his wing, he moves on our behalf, no matter who the person is he's placed over us. It can be our husband, our boss, or the President of the United States. Ultimately, their hearts are in the hand of the Lord, and he is able to turn their hearts any way he chooses. I have watched this with my own eyes in incredible ways. People go, God can't do this, God can't do that. You don't know, and I don't know what God will do if we do what he's asked us to do. I mean, who would thought walls of Jericho would fall down if you marched around them 7 times? I mean, that's stupid. Who would think a Red Sea would part if you raised a rod? That's stupid. But God said, do this. And then God does his thing. So we'll never know what God will do unless we believe him, ever. Because he won't move unless we do what he says. Well, I mean, he can do anything he wants to, but that's what I've found in my life. Listen to Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. Isn't that crazy? Knowing the Bible says this and trusting that it's the truth are two very different things. I saw my own husband make many decisions that didn't seem wise, and I'm trying to be nice, they were not wise. And I would quote that verse. I would be like, the heart of the king's in the hand of the Lord. And I'd think, turn it. Why are you not turning it? I would think, why are you not stopping him, God? Because this decision's going to affect me. It's going to, I just didn't understand. But I started to see through Pharaoh that God not only doesn't stop people from doing things against what he says to do, but that he can also harden people's hearts for his glory. He will use their obstinance to show his children his sovereignty and his power. Won't he do it? I can't help but say that in the middle of this. It just fires me up. God sent Moses to Pharaoh with a bone-chilling message at one part of his journey. Listen to this. Exodus 9:15 and 16. God said through Moses to Pharaoh, "For by this time I could have stretched out my hand," just his hand. God could have stretched out his hand and struck you and your people with a plague to wipe you off the earth. But God said, "I have raised you up, good old Pharaoh, for this very purpose, that I might display my power to you and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth." God took the most powerful nation on the planet and said, I'm going to take this ruler, let him be obstinate, and then I'm going to harden his heart, and I'm going to show the whole world who I am, and I'm going to get glory through this man who hates me and will not do what I'm saying. Who can do that but God? God raised Pharaoh up to take him down, and as he was taking him down, he brought judgment on all of Egypt's gods. They worshiped the sun. Well, God brought darkness. They worshiped the Nile god. God turned the Nile to blood. There was a corresponding Egyptian god to every plague God brought on that nation. God is never random. He is always doing more than meets the eye, and his genius mind is accomplishing outstanding things. God wanted to show the Hebrews saw Egypt's gods and their power and felt like they were powerful. God wanted to come and say, every god they have, they're no gods, I'm God. So he not only wanted to deliver the Hebrews from physical slavery, he wanted to deliver them from mental slavery too. He wanted them to know he loved them and that he was the most powerful being in the universe. He wanted them to trust him and follow him. Ladies, God wants us to know the same thing. You may feel powerless, but you are not. You know that same God that brought plagues on Egypt that can do anything. When Moses first obeyed, things got worse. Same thing happened in my life. When I first started living this way, it felt like things got worse. We want God to move on our timetable and give us immediate relief. God wants to do far deeper works within us and around us than we can ever dream or imagine. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power at work within us. We have the power in us that raised Jesus from the dead. He has written down in his word what he wants us to do and who he wants us to be as a wife. 1 Peter 3:1. Likewise, wives, be subjects to your own husbands, so that even if some of them do not obey the word, good old Pharaoh didn't obey the word, didn't know the God of the word. It says, even if they don't obey the word, they may be won over without a word by the conduct of their wives when they see your respectful and pure conduct. Did he tell us those things to make us feel inferior? Absolutely not. He knows his word will put us in the central place of unleashing his power in our homes. He knows what makes a man tick deep inside. God created men, and they're very different from us. Very different. He knows our lives will scream into a man's soul what our words can never do. Just as Pharaoh saw God work through Moses to decimate his country, God would work through us to show our husbands that he is with us and he is fighting for us. We don't have to manipulate or threaten. We can simply get up under God's wing like a little chick gets under its mama. Listen to this. Psalm 91:4. God will cover you with his feathers. He gives us powerful visuals so that we can comprehend in our mind the safeness of what God wants to do. So he said he will cover us with his feathers, and under his wings we will find refuge, his faithfulness. I get up under God, and God's faithful will be my shield and rampart. Those are fighting tools. He says, you get up under me, I will fight for you. Instead, many of us do what comes naturally, which is to fight this battle with our greatest weapon. God said, win them over without a word. No. We're going to use our mouth, either with silent treatment or harsh words. Not sure which one is worse. God is very smart. The things he wrote in the Bible reflect his character. The way he has told us to operate as men and women is deep. When we are a woman after God's heart, he's able to do a deep work in a man that will happen no other way. It's a miracle. We don't see people operate this way very often because our sin nature has lied to us. Our desire is to control our men instead of trusting the God who is ultimately sovereign over every man. God can take the breath out of somebody's lungs the minute he wants to. It is no problem for him. Read the story of Abigail and Nabal. He was a wicked man. She was a good woman. And God killed him. I mean, God is God. He can do this. Then listen to what it says in Genesis 3:16. Then he said to the woman, I will sharpen the pain of your pregnancy, and in pain you will give birth, and you will desire to control your husband, and he will rule over you. Doesn't that sound like just a recipe for disaster? God at the time of Pharaoh is the same God who still sits on the throne. He is the God we have the privilege of speaking to all day long and is available 24/7. I saw in the story of Moses that God gave a command to him to take the Hebrews into the desert to worship him. Moses told their authority, which was Pharaoh, what God had said, and then God took it upon himself to handle Pharaoh over and over again. God did not want Pharaoh to let them go the first time. God wanted to bend Pharaoh's arm behind his back and bring plagues and destroy Egypt. God had a bigger plan than just taking them out into the desert. He wanted to show a watching world who he is. He wanted them to have a life of total dependence. He didn't want to just take them out into the desert for a little while to worship. He wanted them to be free. He wanted them to have a life of dependence on him, of love and trust in him. He wanted to be their God and take care of every need. He wanted to give them a land flowing with milk and honey and show the watching world what it was like to know and worship the God of heaven. Because if you've got the most powerful, just like America is still pretty much the most powerful nation on the earth, you go around the world, people know what's happening in America because it's a powerful nation. Things have never changed. Egypt was the most powerful nation, so God chose the most powerful nation to let his people be there as slaves because he was going to take that powerful nation and crush it for his people and show the world that he's God. The things God would do if we would dare trust him and his word would blow us, our husbands, and a watching world away. Sometimes we can't believe him enough to trust him, or we learn these things too late, or some marriages just aren't salvageable. I mean, that's just facts. We live in a fallen world. Not every marriage is going to be put back together. What does our life look like then if we failed, or we learned what we're supposed to be as a wife and we did none of it right, and we're in the middle of a mess and we want it to be back together, but maybe it never comes back together? What happens then? What does God do with us? God takes us right where we are, and he still has an amazing plan for our lives. It may mean your marriage will never be put back together, that's facts, but it doesn't change God's love. I want you to hear me. A failed marriage does not change God's love for you and his protection for you. When two broken people come together, it's a miracle any of us make it till death do us part. Many won't. God knew this before he chose us, and he chose us anyway. He knew the Hebrews were going to be horrible out in the desert. It didn't change the fact that he was still going to deliver them and do those things. He knows all the stuff about us before he ever draws us to himself. None of us are going to make it to glory without some side steps. If our marriages fail and we walk away, like I said, it won't change his love. He will go with us and he will love us tenderly. He is in the business of binding up the brokenhearted. For those of you hanging by a thread, this is encouragement to try being a wife God's way.